Hi, this is The Constant Show where we talk about movies, and I am Constant, Pattern Recognition Guy. And this week, we will be discussing The Suicide Squad, or Suicide Squad 2 if you haven't brain bleached the first one out of your memory. Overall, I think it's a pretty amazing movie. I give it like an 8 or 9 out of 10. This video isn't really a review, this is more of a discussion of some of the stuff that happens in the movie. So after this point, I'm going to assume that you have seen the movie. There will be spoilers ahead. Whenever I was watching Suicide Squad, there was something that kind of seemed off to me. Whenever we meet Amanda Waller, she's introduced as a pretty competent character. She's the head of Argus, she has plans and counter plans and backup plans, and it's touched on repeatedly. She's got so much information that Batman actually gets some from her in the first movie, and that's how he forms the Justice League. But at the same time, in this movie, her plan looks objectively terrible. So she sacrifices two separate teams of hand-picked metahumans in order to accidentally release an eldritch monster, lose control of the situation, her Suicide Squad, and the information that she wanted to protect. It just seems like everything goes wrong. But then I was thinking about it, and something just didn't seem right with that. And I wondered, what if everything actually happened according to Amanda Waller's plans? Let's look at the evidence, shall we? So let's start with the beach scenes. There are two separate teams. You have Team A, which consists of Rick Flag, Harley Quinn, Boomerang, Javelin, Mongol, TDK, Weasel, and Savant, and Blackguard. The stated purpose of Team A is to be a diversion. But there's also Team B. Team B consists of Bloodsport, Peacemaker, Ratcatcher, number 2, not the first one, Great White, and Polka Dot Man. And the stated goal of Team B is to sneak onto the island so that they can get to Jotunheim and destroy it. Now, right off the bat with these team compositions, we can start to see the weirdness setting in. Imagine I gave you that full list of Suicide Squad characters, and I was like, hey, pick 4 or 5 of them for stealth, and then 4 or 5 of them for diversion. When it comes to diversion, you would probably put the guy who glows from radiation on there, Polka Dot Man, and the guy who's a 7-foot shark, because he's a 7-foot walking, talking shark who's bulletproof. Why would you not send him into the armed ambush? But that's not what we see. Instead, those two are on the stealth team. On the diversion team, we have Rick Flag and Savant, which is weird because Rick Flag's a trained soldier. If anybody is going to be good at stealth on that team, it's going to be him. And Savant's a genius, so you could have easily put him on the stealth team. So clearly there were other intentions for these teams than just their stated purposes. Let's start with Team A. So Weasel dies off the bat because nobody knew he couldn't swim. Immediately after that, Blackguard walks out and announces that he's the traitor and he brought everyone there and they had a deal. It seems suspect that he would be able to communicate information outside of a maximum security prison without Amanda Waller knowing about it. Instead, we have to assume that she's been monitoring his communications and she knows what that deal was. It raises the question of what exactly was Blackguard supposed to do. So if we take the only line that he gets before he gets shot in the face, his objective was to bring everyone there. Seems weird, right? Why would a foreign nation want to bring in a Black Ops team? I think that the reason that Team A was sent was specifically for 2 purposes. Is Harley Quinn. She's the only member of that team who stands a chance at surviving that. You have a guy who has a javelin, he's surrounded by gunmen. What? Another guy has a boomerang. The alien isn't even bulletproof as far as I can tell. She dies in an explosion. And Savant, the only person on this team who's not a jobber besides Harley, is smart enough to know that he should just run away until he gets his head exploded, because that's a better situation than what's going on this beach. That's the smartest person there, and that was his plan. Clearly, Team A was set up to die. Further confirmation of this actually happens during the credit roll scene. So Amanda Waller is sitting in her chair and she's looking at the screen. She sees everybody on the team except for Harley is dead and she smirks. The rest of the team is exchanging bets for their Deadpool around her and she doesn't even flinch. She doesn't even care. Let's say that their stated purpose was their exact purpose, that they were just supposed to be a diversion. You would expect her to be a little bit annoyed about the fact that they didn't even last 2 minutes on this beach. They were a terrible diversion. Instead, Waller just seems satisfied, as though she got her money's worth. I think it's because she knew about Blackguard's deal with the president of the other country, and her idea was to send in Harley Quinn as a Trojan horse. She couldn't just send her in a boat, though, right? Because that would be way too suspicious. Harley Quinn just shows up out of nowhere, off an American airline. Come on now. Instead, you send Harley Quinn and a team full of disposable idiots who are just gonna run straight to death. The guy had a javelin. I've never even shot a gun, but if you give me a gun, I will kill anybody with a javelin. They were set up to die so that Harley Quinn could go to the government in a way that would make sense. Further proof of that is that Harley is the only prisoner that they actually take. It's not because she's not dangerous, she's the one who's running directly into gunfire. And TDK gets killed, and he's at most a minor annoyance. He doesn't even have a weapon, he's just slapping them with his detachable limbs. They almost laugh at him, and that guy gets killed. Harley gets taken prisoner. On to the second hidden purpose behind Team A. There's another part that's a little bit weird there, right? So, Rick Flag is put on the disposable, but he's a soldier who serves alongside the Suicide Squad and is nothing but an asset. Like, if you're sending people to their death, Rick Flag is probably the last person that you send. During all the chaos and shenanigans that are going on the beach, Rick Flag takes the opportunity to run into the forest. Later on in the movie, he says that you never leave a man behind. However, during this scene, he leaves Harley behind, specifically. And I think the only reason that Rick Flag would do that is if he knew that Harley Quinn was going to be safe, and if he had a different objective. So Rick Flag's radar thing disappears. He's gone. He's off the map. And then a member of the team manages to locate it, and somehow, when he locates it, Rick Flag is just sitting in the middle of the rebel encampment. It's not explicit as to whether or not Amanda Waller's there, but I think this was a part of her plan. Because whenever she talks to Team B, she tells them that these are dangerous people and to kill them on sight without asking questions, right? And they do, because if you look at that team, the two people that are in charge of it are both assassins. Polka Dot Man has a weak personality, Great White can barely talk, and Ratcatcher is half asleep throughout the entire movie. So at the helm, you have two killers who have just been told to murder everything on sight. And then you think about that team composition, right? Imagine that we had, say, Savant or Rick Flag on that team. Well, suddenly that situation starts to look a little different. Maybe the whole Rebel Army doesn't get wiped out. I think that part of Amanda Waller's plan was that the Rebel Army needed to be wiped out. That's why she sent in Team B with Polka Dot Man and the Great White. You're gonna send a great white shark to walk through the jungle and then tell them it's a stealth mission. They were gonna get spotted, and once they got spotted, Bloodsport and Peacemaker are just gonna kill everything in sight because those were their orders. Even Flag himself, who's supposed to be the moral center of our movie, doesn't seem broken up over the fact that this entire rebel force just got slaughtered. Immediately after it happens, he's just like, oh yeah, the Suicide Squad, they're a bunch of idiots. Anyways, I think you should help us get back into the city. The leader of the resistance complies. The South American country that they're in has just suffered a violent coup where the royal family, who was pro-America, was wiped out, and they were replaced with an anti-American military dictatorship. Part of the drive behind the plot is that now this military dictatorship has access to Project Starfish, which is in Jotunheim. And Project Starfish was this thing-like alien that the Americans captured in outer space and brought down here, and they stored it in a secret facility. And Amanda Waller doesn't want it to get out because if they have access to it, it's like them having access to a nuke. During the scene where we're introduced to Project Starfish, the president gets a message from his assistant who tells him that the prisoner he wanted has been found. This seems a little bit off because the Suicide Squad just arrived last night. If we assume that he's been doing president stuff all morning, when did he have time to hear about how they kidnapped Harley Quinn? And this is the prisoner that he specifically wanted. The only way that this line makes sense is if the person that Blackguard had been communicating with was also in connection with the president, and he knew that that team was going to be there, and more specifically knew that Harley Quinn was going to be there. It turns out that the president is facing political pressure to get a wife, and it also turns out that Harley Quinn is actually a cultural folk hero in their country for her anti-American sentiments. They don't realize that she's just crazy. She'll just destroy things wherever she's at. It perfectly aligns. He needed a wife, and what do you know? Harley Quinn just happens to show up almost as if she was delivered directly to him. You may be asking, wait, why would Amanda Waller set up Harley Quinn? But you gotta realize that Harley Quinn is probably the most dangerous person on the Suicide Squad, right? And she just Trojan horsed her way directly to the president. There is literally no outcome that comes from this that doesn't end in some kind of chaos and bloodshed. Best case for Amanda Waller is that Harley Quinn just kills the president. But on the flip side, even if Harley Quinn doesn't kill him, his political career is going to spiral down the drain when his first lady is a just complete and utter lunatic. Harley, of course, ends up killing the president. So Flag convinces the rebel leader that she should take the opportunity while everyone is distracted with them in order to wipe out the remaining leadership outside of the military leader. If we look at like Flag's trajectory, during the scene on the beach, he was seen briefly and then he dipped directly to the rebel leader, and now he's giving her plans of what she should do. It's almost like it was orchestrated or something. The president is already, he's got Harley, so we can assume bad stuff's happening even though we as an audience know that he's dead. The resistance is already wiped out, and this is going to take out another layer of leadership in this country. This would mean that at this point in the movie, the only people who could usurp leadership would be the military second-in-command guy. Then we get to the Harley rescue, and two things immediately become clear. The first is that Harley is completely immune to torture. So if there was a person that you would want to end up in the enemy's hands, it would be Harley Quinn. And the second is that Harley Quinn is really, really good at killing people. She wipes out the entire building, which as a Trojan horse I think is pretty effective. So our heroes reconvene, they grab the Thinker, who is the only guy who can talk to the Starfish, and they go to Jotunheim. The reason behind choosing Ratcatcher for this mission suddenly makes sense, as she uses her rats to disconnect all the security cameras around the building. But one thing that seems kind of weird here, that throughout the movie, Amanda Waller's been telling us how the team is carefully picked. Multiple characters comment that, I didn't pick the team, Amanda Waller picked the team. And she says that they're going to need Great Light for his strength in order to get into Jotunheim. But there is no way that this isn't a liability, and we never actually see him demonstrate a strength that would justify sending him on this mission. What it does guarantee is that they're going to get spotted. Even though Ratcatcher takes out the security system outside of the building, there's still one inside the building. So it was inevitable they would get caught there. And it seems like they don't even really have a good plan there other than plant explosives throughout the building. I think that part of Amanda Waller's plan was that they do get into Jotunheim, but they don't succeed in bringing it down. At least not enough to destroy the starfish creature. Because whenever the starfish creature does get out, Amanda Waller's reaction is just, yeah, it's okay. They're an enemy of the United States. No, it's cool. Turn around, go home. Also during the Project Starfish sequence, we learn the reason that Peacemaker was chosen is because he would protect the flash drive at any cost, the information that America is the one beyond the Project Starfish. When you think about it, the only person who could have actually gotten the footage and then released it would have been Flag, because he's the only one who doesn't have an explosive, being a soldier rather than a member of the Suicide Squad directly. So Peacemaker was put on the team directly as a foil to Flag to prevent him from going public with the footage. Peacemaker states repeatedly peace is his only objective and he'll get it without any cost, something Amanda Waller would know having access to a psychological profile. And all she would have to say is that this thing is a threat to peace, something that he echoes himself during the very scene. It had to be Peacemaker because Bloodsport is friends with Flag, so she probably couldn't have convinced him to kill Flag in the same way. So then something else kind of weird happens. Peacemaker kills Flag, Flag's dead, and he holds the gun on Ratcatcher. If we're being the most conservative with time in terms of how much time could have possibly elapsed between all this other stuff happening, bare minimum, Bloodsport has to fall 9 to 20. It was a lot of floors. He was just doof, 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 doof. And that whole time, Peacemaker had to be just standing there with a gun pointed at Ratcatcher, not shooting her. Little suspect. You would think that if he would kill a personal hero to stop this information getting out, then he would have no problem just shooting Ratcatcher and then shooting the drive itself. He could have done all this before Bloodsport came down to the same floor. And I think it's because killing Ratcatcher wasn't part of his objectives. Flag is the only one who would go public with the information. Later on, the heroes use the information as a bartering tool so that they can escape getting blown up, or prison sentences, or like their family being harassed, or all kinds of other stuff. It's on a private server, right? Which, if you think about it, actually works out pretty good for Amanda Waller, because now it's life or death for them to make sure that the secret is protected, because if it ever does get out, bam, neck explosives, all of you, just gone. Before that though, Star the Conqueror gets out, he's wreaking havoc all over the place. Amanda Waller says, leave, turn around, go back, you're done here. From here, I think either interpretation works of A, like everything that happens after is still planned, or B, that this is the point where her plan officially stops. Because it would make sense if her plan was just to let this thing loose, right? And then you send in like somebody like Superman who can just be an above board face of America, and then after that it would be super easy for them to set up some kind of puppet government. But then I realized that even with them taking down Starro, it doesn't actually change much for Waller, because their leadership is still entirely devastated. They've just suffered like a natural disaster beyond belief. Large chunk of their population has just been starfished to death. So Amanda Waller's team actually hits her with the lamp, and then they give Bloodsport and his team like access to all the stuff that they would have had otherwise. And despite being knocked out with the lamp, Amanda Waller doesn't fire everybody who's involved with helping them, which seems like the kind of thing that you would do if you thought that they were all guilty of treason. Whenever Bloodsport at the very end explains to Amanda Waller that he's got the footage and he's going to upload it to a private server, she says to him, "I told you I would make you a leader, and I did." This is not somebody who is taking an L right now. This is not somebody who has just been outsmarted or outplayed, right? This is somebody who sounds like they got exactly what they wanted the whole time. So what was Amanda Waller's plan? To give sort of a timeline for events, there's the regime change. Waller needs a plan in place to deal with this country that has rising anti-American sentiment. If she studied the country at all, she would probably know about Harley's status as a cult hero within it, and I think that's where the plan begins to form. She has Blackguard leak the information to the president so that the president will kidnap Harley Quinn so that Harley Quinn can act as a Trojan horse, either destroying his presidency or destroying him literally. She has Rick Flag go off the radar and then onto the radar at the rebel camp so that she can destroy the rebels as well. Rick Flag is the one who seeds the idea to the rebel leader that she should take out the other leadership, and then at that point all that's left is the military, which Starro takes care of in pretty brutal fashion. I think the plan to go to Jotunheim was destined to fail from the beginning. Not enough to bring the whole thing down, which would kill the starfish, but at least enough to damage the structure. The plan was always for Starro to get out, because Starro forms the crisis that America could step in and solve. And then whenever they stepped in and solved, they could install their new government. And honestly, at this point, what resistance is there even left? The royalty's all wiped out, the military is all wiped out, the resistance is all wiped out. Considering like the two possible scenarios, like scenario one, right, nobody gets the footage, then you can send American heroes next day to bring aid or whatever. And scenario two, which is Bloodsport gets it, protects it with his life, which you know he's going to, he's an assassin. It's pretty good. The only difference between these two situations is the optics, and in the second scenario, she now has a suicide squad that is led by Bloodsport. A couple quick points that I didn't have time to address earlier in the video.
Couldn't Harley have died on the beach?
That's a good question. Probably not. So if we look at her combat scenes throughout the movie, she has to be at least a bullet timer capable of dodging gunfire. And I say this because there's the beach scene, but then beyond that there's also the scene where she escapes and at multiple points takes people out before they can fire on her. And third, whenever the Jotunheim building explodes, she realizes in slow motion that Polka Dot's thing is going to hit the explosion, right? and then after that pulls him to safety, and then after that pulls him to safety again before he can get hit by the explosion. She reacted to this explosion 3 times before he could do anything. I think she's probably capable of dodging gunfire in this fictional universe. And then beyond that, we could probably infer that the soldiers were told to aim away, because if you know that there's going to be a very important prisoner showing up, you're probably not going to shoot directly at her.
Why use such a complicated plan?
The reason for that is to destabilize the entire region. So let's go back to that little team Pickens theory, right? Let's say that we do get our ideal stealth team. We can have Ratcatcher, we'll have Flag, Peacemaker, Bloodsport, and Savant. They're probably going to get in a Jotunheim. They're probably going to place their explosives and blow up the building and destroy the starfish. The problem with that, though, is that afterwards, the president is still going to be in charge, and then he's going to be able to rile up even more anti-American sentiment. I think that's why Amanda Waller did it, is so that she could completely destabilize the region, and then afterwards she would be able to set up a new government. What's crazy is the amount of resources that she spent on it, because if you look at the Suicide Squad, either Team A or Team B, there's not many A-listers on there. I'd say even Bloodsport himself is like a B or a C. She took down like pretty much an entire country using backup villains. But that was the movie. Those were my thoughts. What were your thoughts? Did you see it? Did you like it? Love it? It's been The Constant Show. You have a wonderful night.
We're gonna twerkulate.
We're gonna twerkulate.